Hello friends, it's Light, and recently I watched Inside Out 2, one of Disney Pixar's most anticipated sequels and upcoming films for this year. It's a little crazy how the original movie was made almost a decade ago, and honestly, going into it, I was a little scared and skeptical. For my wish video, I already expressed that I didn't believe that there's been a huge positive reception for a movie, both from a personal and outside perspective recently since Encanto, Luca, and Turning Red, and sequels usually have a reputation of not doing so well compared to the predecessor. And with the addition of new emotions, I was a little surprised. The additions of anxiety, envy, embarrassment, and ennui have had mixed reactions as well, and I was a little bit intrigued to see how well they'd handle juggling 4 new characters when there are already 3 other existing characters who still needed a little bit more fleshing out. So I went ahead and watched the movie with these thoughts in mind, and I came out a little confused about my feelings for the movie, honestly. I had mixed emotions about my feelings towards Inside Out 2. Spoiler territory for the rest of the video, and I don't think I'm going to provide as much plotline context as I have the previous essays that I've done. I'm going to treat this video as if you, the viewer, has already seen the movie, so to get better context for the video, I suggest watching the movie first. Honestly, I debated whether or not to even make a video talking about it because I didn't have any strong feelings for Inside Out 2, which wasn't what I expected, honestly. I loved the original Inside Out, so why wouldn't I have any strong feelings one way or the other when watching the sequel? I expected myself to be either very impressed or very disappointed, but I found myself to be right in the middle. When I thought about it a little bit more though, I think I did end up liking it because I don't think I actually disliked it at all, but I think something was definitely missing. The movie was enjoyable to me. I actually did like a lot of the additions of the extra emotions and the conflicts that arose. I loved the additional world building to the mind and how it affected Riley in the real world, as well as her experiences throughout the movie, but the emotional aspects of it didn't really hit me, and I feel like I could be a pretty emotional person when it comes to climaxes like this, like especially on the topics and themes of growing up and the conflicts of your sense of identity. And when I gathered my thoughts, I actually came to the conclusion on why I didn't feel so strongly about these parts of the movie, and it was because I was freaking anxious the whole entire time. Like everything that anxiety did throughout the movie for Riley, the way that Riley had to pretend to be somebody else, the mistreatment of her old friends, the pressure that she put on herself to achieve a version of herself that is practically impossible, gave me anxiety, and I think that's why it tainted my ability to enjoy the movie full-heartedly. And yeah, I know that was the point, but upon realizing, I was like, oh crap, I wasn't the only one who had all these new emotions literally activate in my brain on repeat, was I? Was it intentional? Was this an emotional loop? Pixar 1, Light 0. But ironically, that anxiety got in the way of my enjoyment of the movie fully, so do you know what I did? I watched the movie again, and I had to say upon second rewatch, it was actually a much better experience overall. I'm happy to say that it actually boosted my personal rating from a 7 out of 10 to probably an 8 out of 10. I did still agree with some of my initial thoughts about the movie, so let's lay it down starting with things that I did like about the movie. I surprisingly liked the additions of the new emotions. I was a little bit iffy with them because I initially thought that these emotions would just have been a combination of the main 5 emotions that was displayed in the original movie, but the new emotions do make an impact on how they change Riley's perception of the world, and I do appreciate that the new 4 emotions claim that title of new emotions in a sense where they drive the idea of Riley not needing her old ones anymore. With their newer emotions calling Joy old school and Ennui having her own phone, it's a bit silly distinguishing the old and the new in a sense where the OG emotions and the new emotions kinda remind me of the entire debacle of millennials versus Gen Z, or if you're younger you can debate Gen Z versus Gen Alpha. I don't know, you get my point. But let's go into the new emotions one by one. Anxiety can be considered the main antagonist of the film, saying that she is working directly against Joy, our protagonist, and I do like that despite her being the antagonist, she isn't completely villainized, just somebody who parallels Joy as somebody who wanted to have the best for Riley, but approached it in a way that wasn't suited for her. Admittedly, I actually didn't like anxiety, and I said it earlier, it's because yeah, she gave me anxiety, but again, that was the purpose of a character, and I appreciate it nonetheless. But I really do like her character and her good intentions despite it eventually hurting Riley in the end. I do have to humble myself with anxiety because if I was an Inside Out, she'd probably be the one controlling my console. Envy is super cute, and I really liked her, but I felt like she was different from my expectations of how she'd be portrayed. When it comes to Envy displaying her emotions, it comes off with more admiration and awe instead. I guess I was expecting a little bit more resentful or even passive aggressive from something like Envy. I guess you can argue the definition of envy versus jealousy in this scenario because it's really tricky to distinguish the two really. When looking at the definition of envy according to dictionary.com, it can be described as a negative feeling of desire, which could be a mix of admiration and discontent, but not exactly malicious, which Envy in the movie does display. But I suppose it's a bit new and interesting to display envy in a way that isn't totally negative or hateful. I really liked Ennui actually, and I liked how nonchalant she is and how important her emotion can be to the mind of a teenager, indifferent and boredom, traits that we are definitely expressed much during an age where you're trying to fit in and act cool. There's not much actually I can say about Wee Wee here, but her non-gags hit and her minimal effort really embodies her emotion. Embarrassment in general is very wholesome in the way where he doubts anxiety's plans and helps sadness out. He's just a dude, he's just a guy, and I appreciate him. And then we can't forget about Nostalgia. Her brief appearances were sweet and cute cute, but that's about it, seeing that she only really appeared in like 2 to 3 scenes. I don't really include her in the category of the new emotions, but nonetheless, let's go on to the other topic which I wanted to talk about, which is the world building expansion. So one of the new features that we got to see within Riley's mind is the concept of repressed memories. And I found this aspect of the movie very funny, but it's also totally real. So what I like about Inside Out is how well they're able to incorporate real life functions of our brain to simple concepts to show our audience, especially children who might be learning about how the mind works. When it comes to darker aspects of memory such as stress and trauma, bringing science into it, the impact of these events triggers a response to our sympathetic nervous system to interfere with our memory processing and repress them to protect our brain. And this nervous system creates what we consider our flight or fight response, and it could vary person to person. So Joy demonstrates this in particular in the movie by taking any memory that causes Riley some sort of distress or discomfort into the back of the mind, saying, "We're just not going to think about that anymore." Totally felt in the long run, to be honest. Another new interesting concept is the sense of self, and I really loved the scenes and the aspects of the sense of self. This expansion was wonderful, and the entire scenery was just so beautiful. And I loved how every memory and encounter that Riley has when she grows up shapes her to be who she is presently, because that is what happens in real life. The events that happens throughout our lifetime shapes our beliefs, in which shapes our self and our morality. And I love seeing how it's all connected and how different emotions can create different senses of the self. But Riley, you and I have many different perceptions of ourselves. The ending scene in which we discover we're not limited to the one ideal version of ourselves really speaks, and it could definitely hit a lot of older audiences who are still trying to discover who we really are. And sometimes we can't force ourselves to be something that we aren't, like how Joy created Riley's sense of self on being a good person, and how anxiety tried to build Riley up to be this new, greater version of herself, only to create a version of Riley who doubts herself, saying that she isn't good enough. The whole entire movie kind of bases off Joy versus anxiety, in a sense where they're battling to see which Riley is the true Riley, for them to realize in the end, when Riley isn't limited to one sense of self, she can eventually be able to embody all of it. And it goes about speaking, but it shows that we can be many different things at once, and it's a matter of acceptance that the good, bad, ugly, and beautiful, us as human beings, are complicated, and that's okay. I can only tie it to the very famous line from the game Undertale: "Despite everything, it's still you," and that message that the movie also gives is really beautiful. Adding on to the topic of the themes of the movie, and aside from the topic of self-discovery, it also dives into the topic of change. As soon as that puberty alarm hits and it's time to grow up, things get chaotic really soon and real fast, especially when the new emotions show up and anxiety starts taking control. And for the main emotions like Joy, this change is sudden as she feels replaced. And this is conflicting with her own sense of self, because she learned through her past interactions with sadness in the first movie that Riley needs all of her emotions. But how does one go through with more emotions when Joy feels like she's not needed anymore? When you try your best to continue your routine to find out that it doesn't work anymore, or a shift in environment causes you to force to adapt, it's pretty scary. And we've all been there through instances in which we've been in situations where we need to change, or changes upon us, and we might not be ready for it. Even this can be seen when reflecting onto Riley. All of her emotions act up upon sudden changes of her transition into middle school to high school. Riley and anxiety avoiding the confrontation of dealing with those feelings of Riley's best friends not going to the same high school as her. They try and focus on coping with shaping a future where she won't be alone when they leave. Dealing with said change, Joy and the emotions to set off to stop it, seeing as they believe that the Riley that anxiety is creating isn't the Riley that they believe is the real Riley. Joy clings onto the Riley that she created because it's been the Riley that she knew for the last 13 years. The change is so drastic and affects the layout of Riley's mind. The tunnels of long-term memory, imagination land, and the creation of the sarcasm. Everything is changing. And that happens in real life. We aren't the same person now as we are when we were younger. And this also dives deep into how sometimes people can cling on to the old versions of themselves. At the climax of the movie, once they find Riley's old self and have lost their way back into headquarters, Joy's tactics on trying to solve the situation slowly turns into acceptance as she realizes she's done all she can to deal with the changes, and maybe realizes these changes need to occur. The line everybody has been talking about, "I don't know if we can stop anxiety, maybe when we grow up we feel less joy," really resonates with a lot of people, because unfortunately when we grow up, it's true. We don't have the bliss of innocent childhood anymore once we experience the hardships of growing up, learning about the world around us and the struggles that we have when it comes to the journey of both self-discovery as well as dealing with the external forces that are out of our control. Things are constantly changing about the world, about our friends and family, and about ourselves, and it can absolutely be terrifying. But what we can do is take things one step at a time. And again, I went over this in the previous segment about the self, but being able to embrace all parts of yourself is a really good message that Inside Out 2 tackles here. Now, for the criticism aspect of this movie, I think I don't really have much if I'm being honest. I think the storyline flowed really nicely, and the sequence of events that played out worked well and causes the conclusion to be satisfying, but the weakest point of the movie would have to be the emotional aspect of it, since it didn't land entirely for me as discussed earlier. When it comes to the part in which the pathway to headquarters was destroyed, as well as Joy's hopes in saving Riley's self, she's devastated as she kneels down against the memories as she looks through them as if she's looking for something, maybe a solution. And this scene confused me a little bit because I didn't know what the scene was trying to say. Maybe I missed something and somebody could help me in the comments, but this scene was a little bit too familiar, right? It was basically the same exact scene as the one in the original Inside Out where Joy and Bing Bong were forgotten and she overlooked the core memories. I don't know if this was an attempt of a parallel, but needless to say, it wasn't as impactful as it was compared to the original. Joy being defeated and being able to feel sadness and emotion that she isn't supposed to embody, that's something that we already saw. It was kind of like a feeling of, oh, we already saw this play out before, that the movie wants to feel sad and sympathetic to Joy's feelings, but how can we when we already saw this scene in the first movie already? Maybe an alternative to this wouldn't be defeat, but rather extreme desperation and frustration, an alternative to her sadness, and a different side to Joy that the audience can see. We already saw Joy dive into this territory with the delusional scene, and I think it could have been expanded upon by either letting her really blow up or having her truly let out her frustrations and feelings of anguish. Joy put so much energy into her positivity and her hopes when it comes to saving Riley and herself. She could frantically search through the different memories looking for something that she may have missed, but she has to accept that change is inevitable and we need to let Riley go. Hence taking those beliefs to convince anxiety that she also needs to let Riley go. But I think the only other thing was just a small detail about all the emotions sleeping, but then in the original movie there's always one emotion on night duty, so does that disappear when you get older, or was that just a missed detail? But you know what, it's not too big of a deal. Yeah, talking about everything in the end actually made me realize that I might have actually talked myself into liking the movie a little bit more than I thought. Overall, I would say Inside Out 2 was pretty good, and I liked it, but it wasn't mind-blowingly amazing. It was definitely one of the better sequels for Disney Pixar movies, but then again, I feel like there isn't really competition here, seeing that the only sequel that can be considered outstanding would be the Toy Story franchise when thinking about Pixar. But for the record, I really did like Monsters University despite it being technically a prequel, but I think it's really nice to be able to leave a movie feeling more positive feelings for it than negative. It's a bit of a refresher, and hopefully when it comes to more future Disney Pixar movies, we can expect this level of satisfaction for the future original movies as well. Ilio, please be good. So thank you guys for listening to me yap, and until next time.